every time I moved into a hallway, they were either behind some drapes or some door looking for me. So it's a credit to your team. But this transformation, we could celebrate all the statistics in regards to the amount of money, the billions, the $2.2 billion in transit, but that's not the victory. The victory is the transformational change in funding, the sustainable funding mechanism that we now have in place. No, there was nobody in the legislature. I don't take a lot of credit for a lot of things, Chairman or members of the CTA, but I will take credit for this. Having the, with due respect to everyone here, having the cojones to get in front of a 25-cent gas tax. Not, there isn't many folks under the dome or in the city council who would say, I'm going to put my name to that. In fact, if I don't get reelected in 2022, I may have to go get a CDL to maybe drive a bus to Orville. But nonetheless, I knew that it was important to get out in front of revenue for transit and transportation and infrastructure. I knew that it was important that we could not leave home without having a new way of doing business and a new way of investing. And I knew that we couldn't leave home, Springfield, without ensuring that that we put our money where our mouths are at, and we as the body politic, and that we treat the transit system, the third largest transit system in America, like a utility. I've been saying this for years. We help finance, the ratepayers help finance smart grid. We help finance our gas pipeline infrastructure. We help finance the 5G telecom industry. We as Illinoisans help finance a lot of upgrades to our quality of life. Yet we have failed until today of making the adequate investments, continual investments in our transit infrastructure. And so I'm just glad to have put my name behind this, and there's been a whole host of other characters that were helping me along the way, like Representative Arroyo in the House, as well as other members. So I look forward to working with the CTA. Chicago is important to me. Chicago is important. I just mentioned that to Mayor Lightfoot just a few weeks ago in Springfield as she visited. Chicago must not be forgotten in Springfield. I was born and raised on the southwest side of Chicago. I wear black on the southwest side of Chicago. I'm sorry for you Cubby fans, but you guys wear black. And I live and breathe the Chicago Transit Authority and its system and its employees and our residents that it serves. So thank you for your team that you sent to Springfield, Jerry Alder and Dorval Carter, yeoman's effort. Transit has never been as successful as this round of capital investments than ever before in the history of the CTA, and that's a credit to a lot of your leadership here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before we recess into FAB, and again, one of the things that I want to say, and like you said, when history is written, what you provided and Representative Arroyo provided is certainty. I think having been an elected official, you're absolutely right. Every year we come down with, hat in hand, talking about funding that we need. But now you provided certainty. And the same thing I mentioned to Dorval we were talking about before you came in. Trying to get federal money. They've changed the formula in terms of what you need for a local match versus the way it was 10 years ago. And so by having that PAYGO funding that we know every year we're going to get, now we can talk with them about, guess what, we need more federal money. We've got a local match now. But more importantly, you provided certainty for the residents that you represent, but you also provided certainty for all of our customers throughout the city. And that says a lot. And again, as chairman of the board, I want to thank you and the other members of the General Assembly, because I think it says a lot that in the history of CTA, we've never had this kind of certainty and we've never had this kind of success when it comes to capital funding in Springfield. I don't know if any of the other members have any comments or doable before we recess?
Well, you've obviously been hearing me comment all morning about how thrilled I am with this, but I had not had a chance in the presence of the senator to express my personal thank you for the work that you did on this bill. And I know I have sat in his district office. I have sat with him down in Springfield. I have explained to him what I'm trying to do here at CTA and the vision that I have for this agency. And he has certainly welcomed that vision, and more than welcomed it, he's now put money where his mouth is. And so I'm looking forward to a lot of ribbon cuttings. I'm looking forward to a lot of job opportunities. I'm looking forward to a lot of contracts for minority-owned businesses that will all be a part of what we're going to be able to do with the type of dollars that will be available for us to invest in the city and in this agency. And so the legacy of what both you and Representative Arroyo have put in place here is going to live far beyond the bill, far beyond the bonding program itself. It's going to basically set a foundation for growth, particularly in transportation, and the opportunities that we're going to be able to pursue as a result of that growth will be transformational. And you now basically have your mark on that transformation, and for that I thank you personally, as someone who believes in that, and also on behalf of this agency. Thank you.
And I also want to say that we will still be in the corridors and behind curtains. So just because you provided certainty doesn't mean that you won't continue to see us. Exactly. And I'd now like to entertain a motion to recess into audit, finance, and the committed budget. Secretary, would you call the roll?
Yes, it's been moved and seconded. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irving.
Yes.
Ms. Alf-Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Silva. Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
Yes, that motion, hold on a second, Alex. That motion to recess into finance, audit, and budget has been approved, but we're not going to start that meeting for about 4 or 5 more minutes. Just going to take a little bit of a break here.
Okay.
Okay? All right. So we've already recessed, so we're now, we just have to start the FAB meeting, because we're recessed out of the board meeting, so let's start the FAB meeting.
But I thought we were going
We're-
to,
we're-
okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I would like to call to order the June 12, 2019 meeting of the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget. Will the Secretary call the roll?
Yes, Reverend Miller. Mr. Irvine.
Here.
Ms. Alva Rosales.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Chairman Silva.
Here.
Yes, we have a quorum of the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee with 5 members present, but before we start what's on the posted agenda, we're going to ask Mr. Perry to please come up. We're going to do public comment, step right up. So we usually do it during the full board meeting because, as you can see, it got a little bit different today, and the Open Meetings Act does allow public comment during committee meetings, and we have the entire membership of the board on this committee. So we now ask you, sir, to please, you can address the committee, which is also the board.
Great, thank you. My name is Jim Perry. I live in Chicago, and I'm a longtime CTA rider, and I do have a concern. So I'd just like to lay out some points and then ask you for feedback, if you would, please. So smoking is illegal on CTA trains, buses, and platforms, Ordinance 14-60. I've noticed a marked increase in the number of people smoking cigarettes and e-cigarettes on trains and platforms, especially the red and blue lines and the Roosevelt platform. They do not seem to care that they are breaking the law. Passengers should not have to inhale cigarette smoke during their commute. We need to stop the problem before it gets completely out of control. A suggestion is to update all of the pre-recorded announcements to include no smoking on CTA property and step up enforcement. And another idea is New York City's Broken Windows program. I know it's controversial. Would be another good start. It's been very effective in improving the quality of life for residents. We can always switch to Uber and Lyft and deprive CTA of the fare income if things don't change. So I'd like to ask you what your ideas are or how we can reverse this trend of the amount of smoking that goes on CTA trains.
Well, let me first start by thanking you, Mr. Perry, for coming down and bringing this issue to the board's attention. I'm going to have Dorval speak to this. I like the idea of maybe updating our pre-recorded messages regarding no smoking. But one of the things that Dorval I like to have happen is that we would have someone who's going to work on this issue kind of stay in touch with you, but I'll have President Carter kind of speak to the issue.
Thank you. I do recognize that smoking is a challenge on CTA, and in fact, it has been a point of emphasis with our Mass Transit Police Unit, which is run by Chicago Police Department. I believe, in fact, since January of this year, we have issued more than 2,000 tickets to CTA customers who have been in violation of the smoking requirement. That's not to say that there isn't more we could do, and that's not to say that that solved the problem, as you obviously are pointing out. What I would really like to do, though, is to have you sit down with our Vice President of Security, Kevin Ryan, and my Chief of Safety and Security, Ron Esther, so that they can get more information from you about where you're observing this issue occurring, and also work with you to make sure that we're targeting and focusing in areas that you believe we should be focusing our resources to do that. It is one of those issues that's a never-ending, constant battle. We recognize that that's part of a number of things that we need to do to address the experience that our customers have on our service, and I'm certainly not wishing people to go to Uber and Lyft in lieu of CTA. So whatever we can do to support what your concerns are and find ways to make sure you're aware of that, we will certainly pursue that.
Okay, and how do I get in contact with
They
you?
are right here, right behind. I'm going to have them stand up, and then as soon as you leave here, they'll pull you to the side and talk to you and get to your contact information, and you can get theirs to follow up.
Excellent.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
your
it.
time.
All right,
Thank you,
thank
Mr.
you.
Ryan. Again, I apologize for the delay that happened, but I'm glad you're able to speak. Thank you, sir. And with that, Chairman Silver, we can turn back to the regularly
Our
scheduled board
first
agenda.
order of business today is the approval of the committee minutes of May 8, 2019. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Will the Secretary call the roll?
Yes, Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alva Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Chairman Silva.
Yes.
That motion to approve the minutes is approved with 5 yes votes.
Our next order of business is a review of the finance report. Jeremy must be really happy today.
Good morning. Yes, definitely. Again, I'm Jeremy Fine, the Chief Financial Officer. I'll be walking through April results and year-to-date results. With regard to April revenues, we see, as we have over the last several months, a slight drag on fare box revenues, but those are being more than offset by increases on passes. So net, against those two line items, we're about 300,000 to the positive. The reduced fare subsidy, which has been cut in half by the state since 2015, is shown here. So we have a $1.2 million drag on reduced fare subsidy for the month. Non-fare box totals are slightly down for the month, but as we'll talk about on the subsequent page, up for the year. So that leaves us for total revenues for the month of April down about 1.1 million. Not to state the obvious, but if we were to have received the full amount of the reduced fare subsidy, we would have been slightly positive for the month of April. We're a couple pennies positive for average fare, and free rides are slightly higher than where they were in 2018. With regard to year-to-date revenue numbers, we see fare box totals down and passes up. The fare box total number is down predominantly due to the effect of the polar vortex extreme weather in the first 2 months of the year. But overall, we're about $3 million down on fare and pass totals for the year. Reduced fare subsidy, again, because of the 50% haircut, is down 4.7 million year to date. Non-fare box totals are up 200,000, so that leaves us about $7.5 million negative variance to budget year to date. Average fare is up a couple of pennies, and free rides are about 400,000 less than year-to-date numbers of last year. With regard to expenses, we continue to make headway on controlling expenses to offset the negative numbers that we saw on the revenue side. For the month of April, labor is positive over $800,000, as is materials. Fuel is positive a couple $100,000. Power, injuries, and damages coming in as expected. And security services, about $150,000 positive for the month of April. Other expenses are essentially flat, slightly down, but overall, for the month of April, we have total operating expenses approximately 2 million favorable to budget. So if you offset the drag on revenues, we're about $900,000 to the positive for the month of April. As you may recall from last month, we were about 1.1 million for the month of March positive, so $2 million positive, which I'll talk about on the next page. Year-to-date numbers, we see labor slightly favorable, about $760,000. Materials, almost $1 million at $912,000. Same with fuel. Power's up positive territory, about $150,000, and then we have security services, about $674,000, and other expenses over $2 million of favorability. That leaves us on a year-to-date basis, favorable about 5.6 million. So that offsets a predominant share of the drag that we see on revenues. So on a year-to-date basis, we have whittled down that negative variance that we saw as a year-to-date number in February of $3.8 million. We're now down to a negative variance of $1.9 million. So we've basically cut that in half over the last 2 months. We'll continue to enact such measures so that we can continue to whittle down that negative variance that we incurred because of the extreme weather in the first 2 months of the year in the coming months. With regard to the 3 commodities that we purchase, fuel, power, and natural gas, again, we're fully locked in for where we need to be for 19. We are continuing to look for opportunities to buy, particularly for fuel, as prices have dropped recently. So we'll look for opportunities to buy the remaining portions of 2020 and 2021 as prices decline. They're not quite down to historic lows, but they have definitely relaxed over the last month or so. So we're looking for, again, good opportunities to lock in more in that category. Power, we're fully locked in through 2022. And then natural gas, now that the warm weather has started, we'll look for opportunities to buy the remaining portion of those outer years for natural gas.
Any questions?
Yeah, Jeremy, just sort of going back to some of our April revenues. So while we had a banner year when it comes to capital, I think we can all say that after 4 legislative sessions, I mean, we've talked about the fact that we've taken a haircut since 2015 on the reduced fare subsidy. And in light of the fact that we just ended another legislative session without any remedy to this, I think it's a smart bet that kind of going forward, we're going to just have to live with this. I know we can't do a lot about it in our FY19 budget, but sort of going forward as we plan for our FY20 budget, we might as well just remove this. I mean, it is what it is. I'm thankful for the capital, but again, this is 4 years in a row, and I know why we've had it here, because we wanted to continue to highlight the importance of the money to us in terms of going forward. But I just think, as I said, management has done an incredible job on the expense side of holding expenses, and but we've got to figure out another way as an agency to backfill that 1.2 million, because again, after 5 sessions, I think the old saying, if you continue to do the same thing and expect different outcomes, we're not going to get a different outcome here. I mean, it is what it is. Maybe down the road, but again, I don't see it anytime soon where the state is going to address this. So again, it's in the budget for FY19, but as we start to think about FY20, we really probably need to just move that out and figure out how we're going to manage our operating budgets from a revenue and an operating expense going forward, with finding additional ways to be creative and find revenues without always hoping that management can contain expenses to backfill this.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I agree with your assessment of what we should propose for next year's budget. And as Jeremy and I have talked, we do plan to basically take out the hope that we've had for subsidy higher than what the state has budgeted for. However, being the internal optimist that I am, that probably doesn't mean I'm still not going to remind you every now and then of the fact that whatever that number is, it's only funding a portion of what we're paying in free rides, just so that we don't ever lose sight of the fact that at some point in time, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, maybe not the year after that, there'll be an opportunity, just like there was on this capital bill, to address some things that are just wrong and get them back on the right track again. So absolutely, it's a fiscal matter. I think Jeremy and I both agree that this was our last chance to try to get this addressed with this budget, operating budget. It didn't happen, and so we accept the reality of what that means for next year's budget.
Well, that was one of the reasons I didn't want to tell Senator Sandoval what the ask would be, but that's why I shared with him he will continue to see us in the corridors and behind the curtains for additional ask. And this was what I had in mind when I made that statement. But again, I didn't want to dampen the mood in light of the fact that, again, this is a historical day for us from a capital standpoint, and clearly wanted to celebrate that. But again, as you said, not that it goes away, but I just think going forward with future budgets, we just need to be mindful of that fact, and again, just try to be creative. But
Well, and I would,
Jerry's here.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, as Jerry put together his work plan for FY21, 22, 23, it will be to try to help us figure this out down the road.
well, and I will say this: the capital budget will certainly help our operating budget. As I can reinvest in new equipment and lower my maintenance costs and other things, there'll be a corresponding benefit from that. So in some ways, we are getting help with our operating budget, just not the direct help that we were trying to get with the subsidies.
Any questions? Our next order of business is the review of the report from the auditors.
So I'll be joined by Christine Torres, the partner at Crow, which is the prime on our audit contract, as well as Maria Belita, who is the partner at Adelphia, which is the sub on the audit contract.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
I am Christine Torres, and I am partner with Crow, and I am here with Maria Belita, partner from Adelphia, who is our DBE subcontractor on the audit. And I'm happy to say that we have completed our audit of the December 31st, 2018 financial statements. We were engaged to audit those financial statements to determine that they're reasonably stated in all material respects and that they follow all required guidelines in accordance with government accounting principles as well as all the different accounting standards. We did find that, and that we did also audit the federal grant funds to make sure that they were completed and all compliance requirements were followed in accordance with those regulations as well. In regards to the financial statement audit, it has been completed and the auditor's opinions issued. The audit opinion was unmodified or clean, which is the best opinion that can be presented within the financial statements. And it does say that all of the financial statements and the notes that follow it are all materially correct within those reports. As required by government auditing standards, we also look at the internal controls over financial reporting. And when we did those procedures, if we had anything that we would have to identify as a material weakness or a significant deficiency, we would report that. However, nothing came to our attention that met any of that criteria. So Maria's going to provide an update on the federal part of the audit.
Good morning. I am Maria Belita, a partner at Adelphia, and I am representing the DBE partner on the audit. I'm happy to report that Crow was able to issue an unmodified opinion on compliance with the federal programs for the year ended December 31, 2018. CTA receives a number of federal grant programs. However, based on federal guidelines, our testing was focused on two major programs this year. These programs are the Federal Transit Cluster and TIFIA. Due to the size of these grants, we had significant coverage of the federal funds spent, as these are the largest federal programs that the CTA expends from. As part of this process, we also evaluated the internal controls over compliance with those programs. Based on this testing, we reported no findings.
So that is a quick summary of our financial and federal procedures and audit opinions that we have issued. Throughout the whole process, we'd like to say thank you to Jeremy and your team for professionalism and quick responding, as well as to the board members and the chairman who we met with throughout the audit process and provided input as well throughout the entire process. With that, if there's any questions, I'd be
Any
more than
questions? So that means, okay, that we are the best right now.
happy. Correct. That means you
We
are
don't
the
have
best
any-
right now. No findings is exactly where you want to be.
Good.
I really appreciate the Crow folks as well as Adelphia, and being able to turn around a very complicated process very quickly, but that could not be done without the internal accounting folks here at CTA. They do an amazing job of making this look a very simple process. It's very complicated, and again, I appreciate all of their continued assistance day to day to make the audit process even that much smoother.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance amending Ordinance 018-100, approving the fiscal year 2019 to 2023 capital improvement program. Jeremy.
And I'm joined by Michelle Curran, the Vice President for Budget and Capital Finance, that will walk through the amendment recommendation.
Good morning, thank you. As Jeremy mentioned, I'm Michelle Kern, Vice President, Budget and Capital Finance, and I'm here today to present an amendment to the 2019 to 2023 Capital Improvement Program, or CIP. In November 2018, the board approved the $2.9 billion CIP, and we're here now to amend it as we do each year. We will be appropriating additional federal, state, and CTA funding, align existing funding with project needs, reduce the amount of bond funding needed, and adjust the timing of CMAQ funding for RPM and two bus projects. The 2019 FTA federal funds increased by $17.6 million based on the final federal appropriation. The additional federal formula funds will be used towards the purchase of new buses, 5000 Series Rail Car Quarter Life Overhaul and to upgrade certain components of the 2600 Series rail cars. CTA was also awarded $1.5 million of FTA transit-oriented development funds for planning of the Red Line extension. In addition, the state has appropriated $6 million of funding for improvements at the Irving Park Blue Line Station. And also through the amendment, we will add $8.5 million of CTA funds, which resulted from a positive budget variance for fiscal year 2018 to be used for the open fare system payment equipment. And we will also reprogram $24 million of excess funds from projects that have been closed out and use the funding for current projects, including rail cars, track and structure slow zone work, and improvements to certain facilities. The additional funding and reprogramming of existing funds allows CTA to reduce the amount of bonds it needs to issue by $24.4 million. The CIP amendment also includes moving up the timing of CMAQ funding for RPM and electric buses, while moving back the timing of funding for Ashland TSP to better meet the timing needs for those projects. The net funding increase to the 2019 to 2023 CIP is $33.2 million. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, please? Is the money that is owed by the state, okay, is that part of the?
No, we're still working through the details of all of that, so that's not part of the 2019 CIP. It would be part of future capital improvement programs.
Any questions? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item in the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing a co-promotional agreement with the City of Chicago through the Department of Fleet and Facility Management. Jeremy.
Again, I'm Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer. Presented for your consideration is a co-promotional agreement with the City of Chicago Department of Fleet and Facility Management, known as 2FM. This is the 11th year that the CTA has partnered with 2FM or its predecessor, the Department of General Services. 2FM manages promotional messaging for all city programs outside of the purview of the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, known as DCASE. The CTA is providing a little under $400,000 in unsold advertising on buses and trains in exchange for an equal value in unsold advertising on 250 JC2Co bus shelters. This promotion will allow CTA to reach out to a larger audience via the bus shelters, including visitors and residents who may not currently use the system. The large format of the JC2Co shelters will also provide very visible means of communicating not only with CTA customers, but pedestrians and motorists as well. Happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Any questions, please? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item in the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance consenting to the assignment of a lease for property located at 1 South Marion Street, Oak Park, Illinois, Green. Bill,
Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer. Real estate staff is recommending approval of an ordinance authorizing the Chicago Transit Authority's consent to the assignment of a lease for the property located at 1 South Marion Street. Chicago Transit Authority leases retail concession space at the Harlem Lake Green Line Station to Ronnie's Mini Mart, Inc., who operates a convenience store on the premises. Ronnie's Mini Mart is requesting assignment of the lease to Sri Sri Ananta, who will continue to operate the space as a convenience store. The assignment will not affect the original terms of the agreement. Ronnie's Mini Mart will continue to be responsible for all rent and expenses set forth in the lease if Sri Sri Ananta is unable to fulfill their commitments. Pursuant to the terms of the lease, CTA must consent prior to any assignments of that lease. I'll be happy to take any questions.
any questions?
Yeah, Bill, is this the only location that Ronnie's Mini Mart operates out of on our
Yes, sir.
property? Okay. And has the former tenant, have they ever leased out subleased other properties?
I'm not aware of that, Chairman. I'd have to check and
This
get
is
back
the
to you on that one.
first, okay.
Yeah.
Any questions? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item in the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Thank you, Bill. Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing the purchase of primary and excess property insurance coverage for policy year 2019 to 2020. Steve Wood.
Thank you. Steve Wood, Deputy General Counsel in the CTA's Law Department. Before you is an ordinance authorizing the 2019-2020 property insurance policy. The policy runs from July to July and is renewed every year. Our insurance brokers at Mesero and our DBE Paradigm marketed the renewal to both the domestic and international insurance markets, and a domestic insurance provider, HDI, provided the best combination of coverage and price and will be leading the program with other insurers. As you know, our program contains a primary layer of $25 million per occurrence and an excess layer of $105 million for coverage of $130 million. And this year we are adding a second excess layer of $50 million to help cover additional high-value concentrated assets such as the 95th Street Station and the new Wilson Station, so that our total coverage now for this package is $180 million. The proposed premium for next year's policy, along with taxes and fees, is approximately $3,891,000, which is an increase of about $429,000, or 12.4% from last year's expiring policy rates. The increase is based on several factors, including an increase in the CTA's assets and asset values of about 5% from last year, primarily due to the addition of the 95th Street Station. Also, the market for all rail insurance has hardened for the second year due to catastrophic weather events in the United States, and those have led to the increase that we are faced with. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Yes, Steve, one question. So I can, I understand the increase because we've invested more money, millions of dollars. 95th Street, comes to mind, and some of the other investments. But does it ever go the other way in terms of as properties get older, a depreciation, so a lower cost? Does it ever swing back the other way? It's just, I get you want more coverage because you've got something that's more valuable, but also year after year, you also have investments that you might have. I'll give you a good example. I'm just trying to think of Wilson Station. We opened that station up 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm assuming that the longer it's open, or even the Morgan Station, which has been around for a while. Do we ever see the pendulum swing the other way?
There's sort of the accounting,
Yes.
Principle of depreciation of an
Yes.
asset, but our insurance replaces the asset. So we value the asset at what the cost was for building it, $180 million or whatever it happened to be. But because it's a replacement policy, actually the cost of replacing it would increase because the raw materials and the expense and the labor charges of replacing that asset would actually be higher. So it doesn't really work in the
So
same
180
direction.
million to build it, but over time, it could cost 200 million to replace it.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what you're sort of stuck with in the insurance world as opposed to the accounting depreciation of
That's
asset
an
world.
interesting world. They make money regardless. The other thing, how many players are in that market? How many actual companies? You said the market had kind of hardened, so I'm just curious as to how many carriers are really out there in terms of just getting competitive bids.
Our brokers marketed to about 40 companies this year. It was about the same last year, maybe a little lower. The number of carriers who continue to operate in the market and provide us with quotes has gone down over time. It used to be 9, 10, 11, 12. It's now 4, 5, 6, 7. So the number of people in this market has dropped, which gives us less competition and less leverage in terms of arriving at a low price.
How many years have we had Mesero being the broker?
So Mesero is our broker. They don't provide the insurance directly. They market to Lloyd's and HDI and others. They're on a 5-year brokerage agreement, so that was renewed a couple of years ago, and I think they run till 2021 or 2022.
So that's over 10 years?
No, it's a 5-year agreement. So they had the agreement prior, but we put it out to bid, and other brokers competed for that business, and they won the business for a renewal.
So I'm curious, 2 minor things. So with regards to terrorism coverage,
Yes.
is that ongoing and evolving?
So following 9/11, the insurance companies stopped covering incidents that were related to quote-unquote terrorism, and that was sort of a defined term. The federal government then stepped in and provided a kind of terrorism policy called TRIA, where you would get that coverage and the government would backstop it. Since that time, insurers have come back into the market on terrorism and are offering standalone terrorism policies that supplement property policies, and that's what we've gone to. We were using TRIA for a while, but we now have a standalone policy. It's broader coverage. It's, from our perspective, a better deal than relying on the government program.
And when it says which now includes personal injury and property damage claims, so did that not have it before? Is that recent?
It did not. So the terrorism policy in general only covers property damage. This year, a new offer in the insurance market has added what's called active assailant coverage. You can imagine sort of an active shooter or something like that happening. We have decided to add that policy because it was essentially at a flat cost. It didn't add anything. But the active assailant coverage does include both personal injury and property damage for that policy. It's kind of a part of the terrorism policy. It's sort of in the same area of concern.
And the only place I see lower deductible for stationary, so that's a
Correct.
good place that you lower.
Right. Our standard deductible is about $250,000. It's different in some instances, but mostly $250,000.
And we've got art in a number of the stations.
Art is lower. Exactly.
We have a higher deductible for real car collisions and derailments, and how much did that increase?
So it didn't increase from last year. We've had it at about $3 million for a rail collision or derailment for about 3 or 4 years. So that's a much higher deductible at $3 million. Pretty much everything else is at around $250,000. So it's completely reasonable when we're talking about these big occurrences.
Any other questions? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item in the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Thank you. Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Chicago through its Department of Police for federal fiscal year 2018 transit security grant funds. Ron and Kevin, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Ronald Esther, Acting Chief of Safety and Security.
Kevin Ryan, Vice President of Security.
This intergovernmental agreement is between the Chicago Transit Authority and the Chicago Police Department for pass-through funds for the department for pass-through funds of the Department of Homeland Security for transit-related anti-terrorism operations. The Department of Homeland Security offered $88 million to allocate it to high key threat urban areas to enhance security measures for critical transit infrastructure, including bus, rail, and ferry systems. The Department of Homeland Security awarded the Chicago Transit Authority $10.7 million. In the $10.7 million, $4.5 will be allocated to the Chicago Transit Authority and $6.3 to the Chicago Police Department. The projects for the Chicago Transit Authority under this agreement is the threatened vulnerability, physical cyber security assessment, subway tunnels, SCADA system upgrades, and for the Chicago Police Department, the funds will be used for anti-terrorism, OPEC anti-terrorism teams, and transit surge operation sustainment projects. We'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
Is this somewhat of just a reoccurring grant that we go for every year or every few years?
Yes, so it's annually, we apply for these funds annually.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it is an ongoing federal program. that provides this funding source to transit agencies. And many transit agencies around the country basically coordinate with their local police enforcement agencies in terms of identifying projects to be funded by the program.
Yeah, I was just thinking if we have to do it every year, it would just be great to, if they could give you multi-year funding, 2 or 3 years versus every year.
That would be great.
Yeah. Again, just providing certainty is similar to what, State Senator Sandoval was saying, that prior to this, we just didn't have a lot of certainty until this pay-go. But I just wanted to know another one of the federal programs that every year you got to go back through the same.
Yes, every year we do have to go back and apply for the grant. In the grant, we do,
And it's the same amount every year?
it's not the same amount every year. The amount changes. This year, we have less money coming to Chicago Transit Authority and more funds for Chicago Police Department. But in those funds, we have bomb and arson units. We have, in addition to that, mess missions or mobile explosive services that are out. We have funds for the K-9 units. 11 K-9 units are in these funds as well.
The program itself is a discretionary program. It's not a formula program, so the amount of money that's given to us is determined by the federal government each year based on the applications they receive. So, unlike some of our transit funding that comes by formula, where you just know you're going to get a certain amount of money coming in, this is basically determined by Homeland Security in terms of how much they want to give to whom. There's recently been more of an emphasis on giving more money to bigger transit systems, and so we've actually seen the amount of money available for us under this program grow as part of their discretionary decision-making. But the question of how much we get, we really don't know until they make their decisions.
Any other questions? I understand that Kevin is new for CTA, right?
Yes.
Yes, it'd probably be an appropriate time for us to introduce our new Vice President of Security, Kevin Ryan. Kevin comes to us from the Chicago Police Department, where he has recently retired. Kevin, I'll let you sort of introduce yourself in a little bit more detail, but we're certainly glad to have him as a part of CTA's team, and he has already started to make valuable contributions to us on security matters as we head into the summer.
Thank you. Looking forward to working here at the CTA. I have 32 years with the Chicago Police Department. I retired as the Deputy Chief of Area Central, which is basically the middle slice of the city. A lot of experience dealing with all these special events and major attractions here in downtown area, as well as the outlying districts. As they said, I had 32 years experience, and looking forward to putting that to use here at the CTA.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item to the omnibus for approval?
Second?
Thank you, Ron and Kevin. Our final order of business is the review of 3 purchase and sales award recommendations. Presenter is Ellen McCormick and Juan Pablo.
Good morning, Ellen McCormick, Vice President of Purchasing and Supply Chain.
Morning.
Morning, let's start with first contract number A1. Any questions? No questions in A1. Let's move to B1.
Alan, could you just kind of speak a little bit to B1 in terms of this change order? I know there was UO1, I know there were some WIA issues. Is this the one that has some WIA issues?
So Juan Pablo Prieto, Diversity Program Senior Manager. The contractor has not come in on, their WIA commitment, their WIOA commitment on their workforce. We're working with them to collect any good faith efforts that they may want to submit, but we are holding them to their contractual obligation and looking to see if their good faith efforts are not accepted, what contractual obligations that we can assess from there.
What's the penalty? What's, in terms of, let's say, for example, we don't think their good faith efforts, met our standards, what's the potential penalty?
There are liquidated damages, and they have been notified that unless they can show good faith effort, we will be assessing those liquidated damages, and we're holding back a contract amount that is sufficient to pay for those.
And just in terms of going forward, is there anything ever noted if they come up to bid on future contracts, regarding the fact that, in past opportunities, they didn't, meet our workforce goals?
Yes, we have a provision in the contract where one of the features that we evaluate on is past performance. Additionally, when we have the diversity goal in there where they're scored up to 25 points, that's also taken into consideration. So we do look at that.
And in light of the fact that I know we share certifications with cities and other agencies, do we ever notify the city to put them on notice too that, we've worked with these two companies and, when it comes to diversity in their workforce, they didn't live up to their commitment? Do we ever share this information with other agencies?
So with the procurement reform task force that we're working on with the mayor's office, that is one of the features that we share. We do let them know when we've had issues on this matter and various other matters, whether they can take it into consideration or not, but we do let them know.
Any other questions? Let's move to contract G1. Any questions?
I just want to go back to B1. So when will we find out what was the outcome of this? Karen, in terms of liquidated damages, when will the board know? I'm just thinking. Okay.
Next board meeting.
Okay, I just don't want folks to think that they can do this and that we're not going to follow up and the board's not going to be aware of their performance or their inability to live up to their commitments, so, okay.
Contract G1. If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place these three contracts?
I've just got a question in terms of, purchasing 200 new 15-inch touchscreen monitors. Does it make sense to, technology is constantly changing. Does it make sense to purchase or should we lease? And how often do we purchase these so that maybe we don't have to purchase so many at one time?
Good morning. My name is Herb Nitz. I'm Director of Technology Engineering for CTA's Technology Department. Regarding your question, Chairman, this is a one-time purchase of 200 laptops that will go towards replacing our current inventory of obsolete laptops that were purchased 5 years ago. This is using federal funds. This is part of a federally funded program for cyclical replacement and upgrade of our computer systems. So in this specific case, it's a capital investment with purchase.
Is 5 years sort of the timeline? You said
5 years is well past the usable life of a laptop these days. Not only the technical specs and the performance of it, but just even the ability to secure it for a cybersecurity environment these days. So,
what do you think? What should that timeline be?
Well, 3 years is really the timeline. I'm not an accountant, but I think a 5-year depreciation cycle is typical in the industry, so we do try to work around that cycle.
And in light of the fact that these are federal funds, do you think could we apply every 3 years so that we could replace them versus waiting, or does the funding only become available every 5 years?
I believe these are discretionary funds, and it is part of a recurring funding stream from FTA specifically for computer upgrades. And we apply the funding on our most important needs or high priority needs, and this is towards the top of the list right now for us.
I think that one of the one of the other benefits of having a state capital program now is that as part of our 5-year capital program, we can plan better for things like this. When we're basically starved for capital funds, as you can imagine, laptop computers are probably not very high on the list of things to get funded, although I think the technology department's made a really good argument for why we need to replace these because of cybersecurity and obsolescence of the laptops themselves. But I think as with rolling stock, buses, trains, other things, if I can get us on a cycle that will allow us to replace these a little bit over time, year by year, as opposed to 200, in a swap, that would be a better approach. And I'm sure that Herb and his team would much rather be in a position where they can just move these through over a 3 or 4 year period and not have to do them all at once.
Absolutely.
It puts a lot of work on them because they have to literally now pull all these laptops, put in the new software for the new laptops and get them into the hands of the user. So that is certainly something that I hope we'll be able to work through now that we've got some stabilization in our capital funding as we move forward.
Yeah, in a perfect world, we would go on a 3-year cycle and replace and upgrade 1/3 every year. And that keeps, the order of magnitude down for that replacement cycle, so it's balanced over a manageable cycle.
Just a quick question, it might be to you, Juan Pablo. So when it talks about the SBE program, how does that,
Yes.
how is that distinguished from the others?
So our SBE program is set up based on the DBE program. Essentially, we created a race and gender neutral program. So we use the same personal net worth and gross receipt caps. So all DBEs are considered small business enterprises as well. And then anyone who doesn't qualify under the DBE program that is a small business can apply for certification under the small business program. What this program allows us to do is set aside contracts that are $3 million or under, in which there is a high availability of SBEs, so there will still be a competitive pool for the bid. We can set it aside so only small businesses will be found responsive to the bid.
Any other questions?
I would point out with regards that that's been one of the new innovations that we've added to our procurement process, and it's another way in which we're trying to ensure that we're creating opportunities not just for the big contractors, but also for smaller contractors and DBEs with the dollars that we have. And I think you're going to start to see even more of those types of contracts going forward as we're able to pursue more capital projects and more funding to support them.
No, I think that's good because there's a lot of smaller businesses that could really benefit from participating.
Absolutely.
Benefit from,
And we're also starting to do a whole lot more in terms of aggressively reaching out to the contracting community and making them aware of these types of contracts. Particularly, one of the places that we're doing that very aggressive right now is the Red Purple Modernization Project, in which we put aside a series of services that we've identified for small companies and did not incorporate them into a bigger contract so that we could basically spread the opportunity around to other companies to benefit from projects like that, particularly projects that are going to go on for multiple years where those services will be beneficial. So I personally have gotten a lot of really positive feedback about our pursuing this kind of a program, and I think we're going to really continue to aggressively get it out to the communities to let them know that this is one of the ways in which we're creating opportunities for them.
Have we changed the small business, the small business classification, okay, of the way it is, okay, compared with the DBE? Okay, the DBE, you need federal money, right? Okay, is that the same case in SFE?
So the DB regulations require us to have some sort of small business program. It doesn't give us guidance as to how. So we designed our small business program to mirror the DB regulations without the race and gender component. So we still use the personal net worth from the DB regulation and the gross receipt caps that are established by the Small Business Administration.
Are we one of the few agencies that are using that, or is that used a lot across the board, city agencies?
The city has their small business set-asides as well, and we work together to make sure that we're sharing information across all the agencies to make sure that each network is spreading around the bids that are available for the small business community, so that they know that they don't always have to come in as a sub. We have prime contracting opportunities that will help them grow their business in terms of capacity and capability.
So the majority of them are unified?
Yes.
Any other questions? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place these three contracts on the omnibus for approval?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Since there is no further business to come before this committee, may I have a motion to recommend board approval of the omnibus?
So moved.
Second, will the secretary call the roll, please?
Yes, Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alva Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Chairman Silva.
Yes.
That motion is approved with 5 yes votes.
We are, and finally, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
We're adjourned out of finance, right? You ready to go back to the full board? We're ready, Chairman.
Already? Okay. I now entertain a motion to reconvene the regular board meeting of June 12, 2019.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alva Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
Motion's approved with 5 votes. We're reconvened.
Thanks, Greg. I now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of May 8th, 2019.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alva Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
That motion is approved, 5 yes votes.
Thank you. We'll now take up executive session. It is my understanding that there will be executive session this morning, Karen.
Yes, Chairman, we will have executive session pursuant to Section 2, Paragraph C, subparagraphs 1 and 5 of the Open Meetings Act.
Thank you. I now entertain a motion to recess into executive session.
So moved.
And seconded. Reverend Miller. Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alva Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
The motion's approved with 5 yes votes, and so we're recessed. Wrap up. Thanks, Dan. Yeah. And before we begin, I want to remind all the board members and everybody speaking to please speak clearly into the mic. Our sign language interpreters are still having some difficulty hearing you. So just everybody remember that. I'm going to put up a big sign there like Brando had The Godfather, where they had this, everything he had to say that somebody had to show it to him. Anyway, with that, I'll turn it over to the chairman.
Okay, may I have a motion to return to the open meeting of the Transit Board?
So moved.
Second. Second. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez-Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
That motion is approved with 5 yes votes. We're back in open session.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is board item number 6A. Karen?
Yes, Chairman. In executive session, the board discussed the acquisition of a construction easement on property located at 5343 North Broadway Avenue for the red and purple modernization project. And basically, this is a temporary construction easement for the period of 7 years in the amount of $3.3 million. Basically, the property is involved in litigation right now, and this payment will allow CTA's use of the property while the litigation is pending. In the event of when there is a final judgment order, if the amount exceeds the $3.3 million, this will be coming back to the board. The owner of the property is Broadway Real Estate Company, LLC, and staff recommends this easement.
Thanks, Karen. I now entertain a motion to approve board item number 6A, an ordinance authorizing the acquisition of a construction easement on property located at 5343 North Broadway Avenue, Chicago, Illinois, for the red and purple modernization project.
So moved.
Seconded. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez-Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
That motion is approved with 5 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is a review of board item number 6B. Karen?
This item pertains to the Section 28 appeal by former employee Gregory Middleton. His appeal was considered by the Section 28 hearing panel, which issued a written decision, which was reviewed and discussed by the board, with the panel's decision, recommendation to this board being to sustain his discharge.
Thank you, Karen. I now entertain a motion to approve board item number 6B, an ordinance sustaining the discharge of Gregory C. Middleton Sr.
So moved. Second.
Seconded. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez-Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
That motion is approved with 5 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The board will now review board item number 7A and 7B, a resolution honoring Director Robert Patterson and Andre Youngblood. Greg?
Yes, I will read these resolutions into the record for our recent board members. Which one's first? The resolution of appreciation to Reverend Robert Patterson. Whereas Reverend Robert Patterson was appointed to serve on the Chicago Transit Board, and whereas from the outset of his term, Reverend Patterson served with dedication and commitment to approve policies that would support public transit in Chicago and the region. And whereas during his tenure of service, the Transit Board approved its largest construction project in history, the Red and Purple Modernization Contract. And whereas during his tenure of service, the Transit Board completed large-scale neighborhood enhancement projects like the Wilson and 95th Street Red Line stations. And whereas the Transit Board wishes to acknowledge Reverend Patterson's many contributions and accomplishments in promoting public transit and bettering the city and region, now therefore be it resolved that the members of the Chicago Transit Board extend to Reverend Patterson their sincere thanks for the dedication and foresight he has put at the service of the board and the authority, and they wish him the best in all his future endeavors. Be it further resolved that this resolution be spread a record upon the minutes of this meeting, and that a suitable copy be presented to Reverend Patterson as an expression of both our respect and our gratitude for him. Resolution of appreciation to Andre Youngblood. Whereas Andre Youngblood has ably served on the Chicago Transit Board since his appointment in 2015, and whereas in his position on the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee, Mr. Youngblood's thoughtful analysis and policy direction have greatly influenced Chicago Transit Authority's ability to bring continued financial stability to the authority. And whereas Mr. Youngblood has especially encouraged CTA's relations with the many communities in its service area through his leadership in strengthening CTA's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. And whereas during his tenure in the CTA board, he witnessed his beloved Chicago Cubs win the World Series in November 2016. And whereas the Transit Board wishes to acknowledge Mr. Youngblood's contributions and accomplishments in promoting public transit and bettering the region, now therefore be it resolved that the members of the Chicago Transit Board extend to Andre Youngblood their sincere thanks for the dedication and foresight he has put at the service of the board and the authority for the last 4 years, and they wish him the best in all his future endeavors. And be it further resolved that this resolution be spread of record upon the minutes of this meeting, and that a suitable copy be presented to Andre Youngblood as an expression of both our respect for and our gratitude to him.
Thanks, Greg. I will now entertain a motion to approve a resolution of appreciation to Reverend Robert Patterson and a resolution of appreciation for Mr. Andre Youngblood.
Move it.
I'll second.
And seconded. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
Those two resolutions are approved with 5 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is a report from the Committee of Finance, Audit, and Budget. Director Silva.
The Committee of Finance, Audit, and Budget met earlier this morning. The committee approved the May 8, 2019 committee minutes and reviewed both the finance report and the independent auditor's report for fiscal year 2018. The committee also reviewed the following ordinance. An ordinance amending Ordinance 018-100 approving the fiscal year 2019-2023 capital improvement program. An ordinance authorizing a co-promotional agreement with the City of Chicago through its Department of Fleet and Facility Management. An ordinance consenting to the assignment of a lease for property located 1 South Marion Street, Oak Park, Illinois, Green Line. An ordinance authorizing the purchase of primary and excess property insurance coverage for policy year 2019-2020, and an ordinance authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Chicago through its Department of Police for federal fiscal year 2018 transit security grant funds. The committee also reviewed 3 purchase and sales awards. The committee approved all 5 ordinances, all 3 contracts, placed the ordinance and the contracts on the omnibus, and recommend board approval of the omnibus. That concludes my report, Chairman.
Thank you, Director Silva. May I now have a motion to approve the omnibus as stated by Director Silva?
So moved.
Second.
Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
That motion is approved with 5 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is a construction report. Bill?
Good afternoon. Bill Mooney, Chief Infrastructure Officer, and with me today is
Juan Pablo Prieto, Senior Manager, Diversity Programs.
Chris Bouchel, Chief of RPM.
So the first project I'll be providing an update on is our East Lake, Milwaukee, and Illinois substation upgrade. As I've been reporting in recent months, all the activity is now focused at East Lake as we've become complete at Milwaukee and Illinois. We remain on schedule and within budget. A lot of the activity on the site historically has been around kind of the improvement of the building and water tightening down that facility. And last month I showed you some pictures of the AC equipment. Our ComEd feeds into that substation. That phase of the AC installation is complete, and we're now moving into our DC installation, where we're testing and receiving the equipment that ultimately converts the ComEd power we receive and provides it to the field. The first picture you have here is of a rectifier number 4. This is a new piece of equipment that ultimately converts the power from AC that we receive from ComEd to DC. It's part of the new lineup for that. And the second picture shows you this is the old what we would have called the old AC cubicle lineup. So this is where the prior ComEd feeds would have come in and been controlled, that now have new equipment in place, and now we can demolish this out, and it creates the space for our new DC lineup. As we work on existing facilities like this, the staging of the work is exceptionally complicated, so we can continue to keep feeding our system and phasing it in such a way that we don't have those disruptions. The next project I'm providing an update on is our Urina Blue signal project between Jefferson Park and O'Hare. The project remains on schedule and within budget. Since we last met, we had our first 2 line cut weekends on this project. The efforts of these weekends have been predominantly focused on the installation of underground duct banks, cabling, and conduit packages that will facilitate the communication of the signal system between relay houses and to all the wayside apparatuses that help control it. This first picture shows you the first construction weekend. A lot of this work is being performed with rail-borne equipment, long trains with reels of cable and diggers and other such forth. And then the second picture gives you an idea of kind of the duct packets that are being installed in between the tracks. These ultimately carry the message cables to the wayside pieces of apparatus and then back and forth between the houses. The next project is our 95th Terminal Improvement Project, which is quickly coming to a conclusion. Over the last month, we focused on getting the staircase in Terminal number 2 fully opened. I'm in the South Terminal, I'm sorry. This is staircase number 2. This was closed and reconfigured as part of the escalator installation a few months back. You can see the new stairwell here. The escalator continues to be installed. It will be one of the last items we'll be reporting on. And here is some median work. This is the final installation of the median on 95th Street that separates the flow of traffic on both sides and the ability to kind of walk across the street, forces people up to the pedestrian bridge and helps with that safety there. And then the last picture is restoration of the street there and paving. Now that we're kind of in the paving season, this work is in full-fledged. Next project is our Belmont and Jefferson Park Station Improvement Project. All the activity remains at Jefferson Park on the south bus terminal at this point, and remains on schedule and within budget. As you can see here, they've now taken out all the old concrete at that terminal. They've dug down to the subgrade or restoring the subgrade and ultimately installing a new drainage package for that bus terminal. It's been a little difficult with the inclement weather we've had. Playing in the mud and the rain is not always the most ideal work for them, but they've been able to maintain their schedule. And here is the installation of the canopy out there. They've been starting to set the structural steel, and we'll be starting site restoration in the upcoming weeks.
Bill, before you move on the Belmont, is this the one where we've received some calls regarding the leakage?
Yes, sir. We had some concerns raised around the leakage of the canopy at Belmont. We've been actively working with the contractor as part of their warranty work to address kind of where those leaks are coming. They were out there last week actually doing a water test on some fixes there. Some of it is they had, in the gutter, we have debris retainers to keep debris that may collect in the gutter off the canopy, leaves and other such things from going into the piping for the drainage. And so we changed out the restrictor there to open up the flow of the gutter itself, which in some of the storms we've seen recently helped a lot with that ability to move water off of that. But we also did a huge water test on the canopy, kind of after that to test that fix, as well as identify any other minor changes we may need to make. We identified some spots that they made some immediate restorations on and corrected on site, and we're still having some longer term conversations about some other warranty work with it that we think they should be improving on. So,
how long is the warranty of it?
We typically have a year warranty on any of the work that we get in here. We haven't accepted substantial completion on it either fully, so we've got some ground still to work with them on it.
Well, the good news, it's raining every other day, so we'll find out.
Yeah, we're seeing the worth out of it, so. Yeah.
Exactly, okay.
So this is a new project I'm bringing forward to the board. The board back in March approved the Lakeline South Mainline Tracks project, which is part of the Fast Tracks program. It was a $41 million contract with Kiewit for design build track renewal on our Lake Street and South Main Line. This is a very fast-moving project, expected to be totally completed in this construction season. That's why you're seeing it so quickly, is we've already had our first line cut weekend a couple weeks back, and I wanted to share with you some of that. The first weekend dealt with a process called rail grinding, which is the machine you're seeing here. What this machine does is it reprofiles the running rail itself, the steel rail that the train runs on, and helps us extend the useful life of it and improve the ride quality. So it has a series of grinding wheels that actually cuts the head of the rail and reshapes it. And so rail is typically a 40-year asset life, where a tie is 20 years. So we're changing out the ties as part of this, but we'll reprofile the rail so that we get that full asset life out of it, and it ultimately really also improves the ride quality for our customers. So that's what occurred on the first weekend, and I actually have, it's much more interesting in video. So if you want to look up, there's some action going on to give you some sense of kind of what's been going on.
I should point out that we cleared out the activity underneath the
Yeah.
elevator.
Yeah, we have complete closures of the alleys and blocks that we're working underneath. There's ground people there with water canisters in case any debris or anything goes on. And, it's much more visual at night, as you can see here. So, but
Is that
yeah.
video going out on our social media yet?
It did not go out on social media. We did have discussions with Brian Steele's team about the next time it's running out there. They want to come out and get some better video.
Yeah, it might be very popular.
Yeah, I love videos with sparks and torches and stuff, and I think a lot of people will enjoy those as well. So, so this was one entire weekend. We worked 2 shifts, a Saturday shift and a Sunday shift on that under a series of line closures that weekend. It was about 12 hours on either side and doing just one side. And so this was one half of the job zone. This was the south portion of it. And so they'll come back in the fall to do the lake side. So. Chris?
RPM Advanced Contracts, demolition and advanced utility relocation continue on time and on budget. We have we're in closeout with the demolition. Thank you very much for moving forward with the real estate acquisition. That actually completes at least our acquisition phase of that. The demolition is in closeout right now, and the advanced utility work continues. We have an extensive footprint, particularly in the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr section of the program with various utility relocations. The photograph you see here is actually in the RPB area. We're working not only with ComEd, you've heard probably me talk mostly about ComEd in terms of utilities, but in this particular case also with our own Department of Water Management. So those relationships continue successfully. That gives us the opportunity actually to do a lot of outreach associated with these impacts on the streets and in the alleys, an important touch point for the project as it gets going. This is part of the demolition closeout. We have, I think, spent a lot of time on this project trying to be a good neighbor, learning from some of the lessons we saw in the Brown Line expansion project. So when we demolish a property, we want to make sure that we're presenting the best face of this project in general to the community. So you see elements like this wrought iron fence, because this property will sit out here for some period of time while this project reaches successful completion. So when we demo things, we are taking, I think, a step further to make sure that we're presenting the best face of this project to the community, both the residents as well as the business members.
Sorry to interrupt. Is that the Valtravers building?
To the left there, yes.
Yeah. When is that going to be moved? What's the time frame for that?
Well, we're still, we're actively in design with the contractor and moving through roughly 150 to 200 design packages that will ultimately be kind of the backbone of their effort. We have received a preliminary baseline schedule. This work will be accomplished kind of in the front end of this project in association with the other work in the RPB section. But as we kind of get more specifics about how exactly they intend to move it and exactly where it falls in their path, we'll make sure that we put those forward and that the board and others are aware of it. There is a lot of community interest in, I'm surprised because as a construction lift, it's not the hardest thing we're doing out there, but there is a lot of interest in seeing that building moved. So we'll probably put some bleachers out there and have something of an event when we do it.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe hand out some cards on the people riding the train to say this is what you're seeing when you look out the window.
Yeah, they might have the best, our customers appropriately should have the best view of it. So yeah, it will be moved over in conjunction with that building of the bypass and the other bridge, the main 4 tracks that run underneath that bypass. So kind of the first part of the project.
Thanks.
Next. Broadway substation continues on budget and tight to schedule, although the schedule challenges are relatively minor, and I don't see them impacting any of the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr work to follow. This is in the area of Lawrence to Bryn Mawr, of course. Bill kind of explained this pretty well earlier. The work in these substations is pretty incremental. In other words, we work on one section, we kind of finish it, get it ready, and then we move to another. And we do that incrementally because this is still a working substation. Not unfamiliar to kind of most stuff that we show you guys. Our work is really complicated in many ways by the fact that we continue to provide live service. So you see sort of a chunk of the slab in the substation being removed. We're kind of removing it in sections. And then the install of some new rectifier equipment as well. So, and that concludes my RPM report.
I have a question. It's kind of a big picture question, but with regard to, you mentioned the weather, right? And that it doesn't seem to have impact too much. I'm talking more in this instance about the rain. But are we looking at, because the weather seems to be severe, we had severe cold, we've had a lot of rain, and are we looking long-term of what that impact could be? If there's any patterns, and then would that change, how we deal with this? Because it's been raining it seems like every 2 days, right? And this might be just this year, I don't know, but is there a way that we look at that and then begin to analyze when we're putting an RFP out, for example, and, with the cost measures that we take for things like that, severe weather issues, or wind, rain, snow, cold? We've been going through all of it, right?
So as we develop these packages and we go out with them, we put a lot of time and energy into what we would expect the schedule to provide for and which construction seasons we're aiming for. And we actually back into a lot of the dates we're trying to make for procurement based on that. And we try and, especially when we're doing right-of-way work, which has track access implications with line cuts, provide for enough understanding that we have some flexibility in that we're not locking ourselves into the only available weekends, because we do encounter. So near New Blue Signal contractor, actually, the first weekend they were expecting to go, we ended up having to pull back on that first weekend because they had it was one of those really extreme incremental weather weekends. So we do plan for some of those things. We have participated with the federal government in some, not in the current administration's conversations, but with the prior administrations about the impact of climate change on transportation, how we develop our storm systems to handle 100-year storm events that are now more common than they would have been, historically, where they may have been a 10 or 20-year occurrence. Now we're seeing them more every 3 or 4 years. So what is a 100-year storm volume? What's the watershed around those things? So I think, and we prescribe to all the kind of current industry standards so that our engineers and our consultants are always kind of up on the cutting edge of what is the concept and what is that evolution. So we're trying to design for that future capacity and not just for today's situation.
Any other questions for Bill Wan?
I was just going to say, I don't know there's too much more I would add to what Bill just said. That was a very good answer. And the only other thing I would point out is that obviously in construction contracts, any construction contract, the weather element is always a factor that you have to kind of deal with as part of the unexpected portion of the project. That's also why we have contingencies and other things built into the project in order to basically deal with the unexpected events that may ultimately impact our schedule and our budget and things of that nature. So while I don't know that there's been a defined specific strategy around climate change as it impacts construction projects, I agree with Bill that as the industry starts to deal with these issues going forward, the industry as a whole will start to adjust to that, and CTA will be a part of that conversation, whether it's through formal resiliency programs that the federal government pursues, or whether it's through industry gatherings where you start talking about the reality of what you're dealing with in construction because of weather and other related issues.
Any other questions for Chris, Juan, or Bill? Okay, thank you. Greg, is there any new business to come before the board?
No, sir.
Before we adjourn, again, Pastor Miller, I just wanted to express on behalf of the board our condolences regarding the passing of your grandson. I wrote notes, I said a homegoing, because Again, I know you've been going back and forth to Atlanta, and we will continue to lift you and your family up in prayer, but I want to express our condolences regarding the passing of your grandson. With no further business to come before the board, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.